Hello, hello, everybody. My name is Lee Perry, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Ideas for Us. Super excited today to jump really deep into the deep soil and talk about the benefits of fungi and get to interview my friend and former intern who is now making a name for herself as a really intelligent mycologist, Taylor Bright. And for those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, thank you so much for your time. Please drop questions in the chat. And for those of you listening on our podcast, if you want to check out some of Taylor's visuals, definitely feel free to check out the Ideas for Us YouTube, because we're going to be uploading a presentation led by Taylor on our YouTube channel. So thank you all for joining us. And Taylor, please take it away.
Aw, thank you for that super sweet introduction. And I am so excited to be here with you all today to talk about one of my deepest passions and my dearest friends, the fungi. So much to share here, and so looking forward to kind of going through this whole scope. Fungi are these decentralized creatures, and they really encompass so many different realms of life. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of touching on many of those different realms that I'm involved with and work with, and really just be a voice for the fungi. A little bit about myself. This is a long bio, but I tried to encompass all the different realms of work that I do with the mushrooms. My story takes me through different landscapes and different timelines. And I was born and raised in Florida, and really first became inoculated with the presence of fungi there in the wet, humid, swampy environments. There's so much fungal diversity in the Southeast. But I was never really given a platform to study them there. Mycology is a super underrated megascience. And so my first explorations kind of began being in nature, being in the soil, seeing these miraculous fruitings of these multicolored beings coming from all these different areas of the space that surrounds me. It's just holding such deep questions like, who are you, and what do you have to teach us, and why are you here, and what do you mean? And really just following that curiosity all the way out to the West Coast, where I started finding community that felt the same way as me. I kind of always thought I was a little bit of an outsider because of my deep love for fungi, and I wasn't able to find community around that. And then out in California, there's whole populations of folks who are in such deep reverence to the fungi. And so I showed up to my first Bay Area Applied Mycology meeting, which is a nonprofit out in California oriented around the San Francisco Bay Area. I just showed up and I was like, hey, I don't really know much, but I really love mushrooms and I'm really curious about them. So tell me how to get involved. And then that process led me into eventually becoming an officer for Bay Area Applied Mycology, and really interested in both cultivation and really the facet of applied mycology, which is mostly what I do now. Applied mycology being how to ally with the fungal beings to address some of our larger global issues that we're facing right now. And I'll talk a lot about that later. But other than that, I am just a huge fungal enthusiast. I spend a lot of time outside looking for fungi, getting to know them, learning and listening and studying their roles in ecology. They are the grand molecular recomposers of our planet. So they're really kind of the foundational beings that are making all this happen, and the reason why we see the world as it is today. They have a huge role in the creation of life as we know it. Really fascinated in symbiosis and the interactions of all the different beings, and fungi they are the networks that kind of tie everything in together. And yeah, I write a lot of poetry about mushrooms. I make a lot of art about mushrooms. I'm just a total devotee to the fungal beings, really, and they kind of continuously draw me in ways that I could have never really imagined. Definitely, once you're inoculated, it's like once you see, you can't unsee. It's a wild process like that. So that's a little bit about me. And I am really excited to share what I've learned from the fungi with you all. So when speaking about fungi, there's so much that really like wants to come through me. And this being that we see on the screen right now, this is Schizophyllum commune, which is such a beautiful representation of the fungal kingdom to me. They are one of the most widely distributed mushrooms, so they're pretty much found all over the world besides Antarctica, and they're incredibly resilient and diverse. They grow on almost any substrate, and what's really interesting about them, and in a little bit of fungal reproduction, is fungi are non-binary creatures. So there's literally no such thing as like male or female, all these like constructs that we hold in our human world. They reproduce by finding compatible mating types. And this fungi has over 28,000 different compatible mating types. So the spores that they produce, there's 28,000 different ways that they can come together to create a new organism. So that it just speaks to the incredible amount of diversity in the way that fungi can really begin to like peel back the veils and break us open to a different way of seeing the world outside of our own human constructs. It's also an incredible medicine. There's active anti-cancer compounds that they've found in Schizophyllum commune, and it's just a dear friend. And look how beautiful, just so incredible, the forms and the shapes and the curves and structures that they take. Fungi, fungi. You can say it however you'd like. There's many different dialects and many different ways. I used to say fungi, and now I say fungi. It's changed over time. So it's really however you want to speak to them. One of the most diverse kingdoms of life in our planet. Currently, we know about 120,000 species. That amount of species has been described, so has been like documented and recorded and given names. But scientists and mycologists now think that there's around 2.2 to 3.8 million species of fungi that exist on our planet. So that means we know about maybe 6% of the fungal species that potentially exist on this great Earth. And so we're just scratching the surface of really getting to know these fungal beings. They're so incredibly diverse. And just for clarification too, when I say fungi, it's really talking about the entire kingdom of fungi. So fungi does not mean mushroom. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but fungi encompasses molds and yeast and rust and smuts and mildew and all the non-mushroom forming fungi and the beautiful mushrooms that we all know and love. So it's an incredibly diverse kingdom. And just like the mushroom forming fungi that we all know and love, molds are also incredibly ecologically significant. They are doing the work of like breaking down our world and transforming organic matter into soil. And it really helps when you start seeing the vastness and diversity of fungi and how important they are, because it helps kind of break apart this ideology of mycophobia, or like the fear of mushrooms that predominates in Western culture. And it's a really interesting thing, the way that we are taught, kind of like indoctrinated into this fear of fungi, because we think, or maybe we're told when we're young, like, oh, don't touch the mushroom, like that mushroom's going to kill you. But it's really, it's not like that. I think it kind of comes from this fear of the unknown, really. And mushrooms are very cryptic and ephemeral creatures that hide away in the darkness and then come and shine in the light, every so often. But they're so mysterious, and sometimes we have a hard time really deepening a relationship with mystery. And so this is a great way. Studying fungi has helped me personally deepen in my relationship with the unknown and uncertainty and the mystery of existence. And that being said, it's great when we realize that, because fungi are on you right now. They're on you and in you and all around you, and you're breathing thousands of fungal spores right now. Even as I'm sitting in my house, there are fungal spores circulating in and out of my body and existing in my gut and breaking down the food in my gut biome and all over my skin. That's actually protecting me and enhancing my immune system function, and they're everywhere. So fungi are inextricably interconnected to every facet of life. And this is a little chart just to show kind of the main groupings of fungi. We have our molds, and then what we call glomeromycota, which are these arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, which I'll talk about more. They're incredibly ecologically significant. And often those don't even produce mushrooms. So they're fungi that are doing the work in the soil to help plants grow, but they don't even make mushrooms. And then we have our two more well-known classes of mushrooms, which are the Basidiomycota and Ascomycota. And those are the cup fungi and then the guild fungi. And we'll talk more about that later. But this just really goes to show the diverse array that we can find in our beautiful fungal kingdom. And then just to and really uplift when I say the diversity in the fungal kingdom, this is just showing some of the array of expression within the larger, or what we call macroscopic fungi. And macroscopic just means you're able to see it with the naked eye. They're the larger fungal beings. And I won't get too deep in here, but there's just an incredible diversity of expression. We have truffles, which are subterranean fungi that live out their entire life and actually fruit and mushrooms underneath the ground. They're also called hypogeous, so like underneath the ground. And we have puffballs and morels, which are cup fungi. And then we have our polypores, which have pores where the spores come out of. And then we have gills, where the spore is released from the gills. Coral mushrooms that emulate these underwater ecosystems. They look exactly like branching coral. It's really, really profound, the amount of diversity and expression that they hold in it. For me, it really allows us to resonate and allow ourselves to express more in our diversity and uniqueness. Diversity in the natural world equates to resilience. And I think we can learn that from the fungi as well, how to embrace diversity in all the different expressions of life, and how that can actually make us more resilient as a human community. Because it's definitely worked for the fungi. They've been around for a long, long, long time, and they will continue to be around for a long time. Fungi are, not too different from us. And I put this really awesome photo of a stinkhorn mushroom, which literally looks like this wild octopus kind of cephalopod creature that's coming out of the forest floor. They're amazing. And I put that on there because there's a lot of genetic and characteristic similarities between fungi and animals. But we look so vastly different. So how did that happen? Fungi are aerobic eukaryotic heterotrophs. So that is just a fancy way of saying aerobic. They breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide just like us. Eukaryotic mean they're multicellular and have complex cellular structure. And heterotrophs meaning that they need to get their food from the outside world, just like we do. They can't produce their own food like plants. Plants are autotrophs, meaning like producing their own food from sunlight. So fungi have to get their nutrients from the outside world, and have created really incredible mechanisms to do so. So animals and fungi actually share a more recent common ancestor than or fungi and plants. So for a long time, fungi and mycology, the study of fungi, was grouped underneath the study of botany. So scientists for a long time thought that fungi were just these like specialized plants. And then through the increasing technology and genetic sequencing and different realms of understanding our world, we figured out that fungi are actually much closer related to animals than they are to plants, which is really fascinating. And so it kind of totally rewired the understanding of our world when we figured out that plants are less closely related to fungi than fungi are to animals. And you can see in this little chart of our beautiful kingdoms, of our 5 kingdoms, or queendoms, or theydoms. You can see that fungi and animals kind of they branch closer than fungi and plants do. So we share a lot of DNA with fungi, and we share a lot of metabolic processes that fungi do as well, which I'll speak about later, but can actually help when it comes to integrating the medicine that fungi produce in our bodies. It's one of the reasons why fungal medicine is so efficient in the human body. And a little bit about fungal biology and ecology, because I think it's really important. If we're going to deepen our understanding with these beings, or if we're going to, if we're interested in fungi and want to explore our own path in mycology, it's really important to understand, like what these beings are and what roles they play, and kind of have a general understanding around how they express themselves. And so a little bit about fungal anatomy. So all mushrooms are comprised of chitin. Chitin is the structural polymer that makes up their cells. And so it's interesting because chitin is the same structural polymer that makes up the cells in crustaceans and arthropods like crabs and insects. So it really goes to show that fungi have this incredible structural capacity, and that expresses itself in many ways, from being firm to touch and having really strong stipes, and why they can, break through a lot of really hard material to when they want to fruit. So the mushroom itself is really just the above ground sexual reproductive structure of the body of the fungus. So when we say mushroom, we're referring to that fruiting body. And I even like to challenge the word fruiting there, because we're not talking about plants here. So like a mushrooming body. And then the real work of the fungus and the life of the fungus is happening underground, underneath in the rhizosphere, where it's interacting with soil biology and the roots of plants, and kind of totally out of the eye. And this consists of the vegetative part of the fungus called mycelium, and which is created from extensively branching and fractaling networks of hyphae, which are single cell thick, these tiny little filaments that scan through the ground and grow in all directions, and are seeking food and nutrients and water, and exploring and discovering their underground world. And they don't need eyes. They're not visual creatures, but they do have intelligence. They are responsive and contextual creatures, and they're continuously responding to all the different perturbations that are happening underneath the soil. And their way of kind of seeing without eyes comes from their ability to respond and to sense different electromagnetic pulses and different vibrations in the soil and different chemical signals in the soil. And there's so many different ways that the fungi are intelligently moving through the world and really orienting themselves towards and away from food and threats. And it really makes us, question like, what is intelligence? What intelligence doesn't mean you have to have a brain. And it kind of helps us see past the very like head-centric idea of intelligence. And I like to think that mycelium really act as, the Earth's neural network that's sending information and memory and resources all throughout the forest floor and throughout many different ecosystems. So there's many different ways to identify fungi because they're so diverse. There's the cap, they can have scales, they can have gills or pores, or they can be cups, like cup fungi. And those are all just different ways of making their reproductive spores, which are the little packets of genetic material for the next generations. They can have rings, they can have stems or no stems, they can be above ground or below ground. So many different ways, and they can have different spore colors and odors and tastes and different reactions to chemicals that can help you identify. Their spores look different under a microscope. They grow on different substrates. It's incredible. And the journey of getting to know fungi is really, an experiential journey. I can be here and tell you all about these different things, but it won't compare to actually just going out and like sitting with a mushroom and getting to know that mushroom in a personal way. That's how I have learned all my different mushrooms, is really just like going deep out in the forest and just finding one and not even like needing to know what it is, but just sitting with the mushroom and being like, who are you? And what do you have to tell me? And then eventually, breaking out the field guide and finding out all the little like juicy tidbits of information. But they have their own lives and characteristics and personalities and things to say and share. Okay, go to the next one. Great. So the mushroom life cycle can take many different forms, but this is a really simplified version of the above ground, what we call basidiomycetes, or that just means gill fungi. They contain basidia, which is their spore producing structures. So the gills on gilled mushrooms, they drop their spores through amazing different reactions. They can produce their own air currents, and they can, there's this concept called the Buehler's drop, which the basidia, which are the spore producing structures on the gills, can take in water, and then they form their own water droplets and use that water pressure to like eject their spores into space. It's incredible. So the spores are going to come down, lay on the ground. If the right environmental conditions are present, like temperature, pH, water, the presence of water is really important for spore germination. Those spores are going to germinate, and hyphae, those hyphal filaments are going to start growing. Those are going to meander through the ground and use a lot of different ways of communication, really, to find hyphal threads of a different spore of the same species, or a different hyphae of the same species, or hyphae of themselves. So they're really orienting to like, how can I find my kin in the soil? And then these hyphae merge, they exchange genetic material, and then that creates this interlocking, interweaving network of hyphae, create the mycelial network. And then from mycelium, they condense and coalesce, and then they eventually, when environmental signals are triggered of like, I got to reproduce, if there's like lack of food or lack of moisture, well, actually, I take that back. They need moisture to produce the mushroom, but the mycelium condense and they form what we know as a mushroom. The mushrooms are really just condensed, like epically condensed amounts of mycelium. They're not a different type of material. They're just condensed mycelium that fill up with water and then specialize, the cells specialize and create what we know as the beautiful diverse mushrooms that we see. So that's just scratching the surface of the really beautiful intricacies of the fungal life cycle. There. So fungal ecology, I must say, I find it pretty interesting that I was able to get a degree in biology without ever having taken a class on fungi or without ever having taken a class on mycology. I remember in my microbiology lab, we kind of touched on fungi just a little bit. We looked at a couple slides with mushrooms on them, or not even mushrooms, but with different mold spores on them. Wow, that was a long time ago. But yeah, just really, really now as a mycologist and someone who studies fungi so deeply, and really more as someone who studies ecology and all the different inner workings of the systems and cycles of the planet, to seeing how fungi is such an essential part of the understanding of our planet, both the understanding of how we got here, how life evolved itself, and also where we are and how these systems and cycles are continuing to unfold, and also what the future might hold. These fungal organisms are really the underpinnings of why and how life itself exists. And so it's a huge mega science that is really neglected, but at the same time, it's coming online in a really big way, both literally and metaphorically. It is being recognized by the public sphere in ways that make me really excited that this knowledge is really coming into the grander scope of things. And because really mycology as a science itself is only about a century old. And that you might think, oh, that's a long time, but given the scope of things, given the scope of their presence on the earth, it's really not that long that we've been intensely studying these beings. And so there's so much to learn from them. They're the grand molecular decomposers and recomposers of our planet. They've been doing this work for a long, long, long time. And if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for fungi's ability to create these enzymes to break down organic matter and lignin and cellulose, our world would be buried under miles and miles and miles of organic matter that has never decomposed. So it's really wild to think about that. Through that decomposition, they're building soil, they're recycling nutrients, they're huge players in the grand cycles of carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus on our planet that kind of dictate life itself. They provide food and habitat for animals and for the little tiny beings in the soil. They connect entire forests and entire ecosystems and landscapes. They actually alter the hydrological cycles, which is really fascinating, that I'll talk about. And they also provide immunity for animals, plants, forests, humans. They are definitely a powerful force of healing and health for all of life. It really helps to know fungi's role in the ecosystems around us. And a lot of their means of nutrition and how they acquire nutrition and how they eat actually helps distinguish their roles in the ecosystem. And there's kind of these three main groupings of fungal nutrition. There are what we call saprotrophic mushrooms. Saprotrophic literally translates to sapro, meaning dead or dying or decaying, and trophic, meaning feeding or eating. So these are the fungi that are feeding and eating the dead and decaying organic material on the world. They're the fungi that you're going to see growing out of logs and dead stumps and trees, and poop and whatever else is dead or decaying, including animals, all different types of things. There's the mutualistic or biotrophic fungi, which include the mycorrhizae, and these are fascinating beings. And that is the mutualistic relationship between fungi in plants. So living plants and living fungi, the mycelium and the roots of those plants create this mutualistic symbiosis that helps the plants live and the fungi live. There's endophytic fungi, which is fungi that live in or on the cells of plants, so on leaves and on bark. This is a huge branch of fungi that we're really just learning the intricacies about, and they're really, really important. It's found that every plant actually has these endophytic fungi living in or on them as like an innate part of their life. And then we have lichens as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then we have parasitic fungi, those that are sapping the life force out of their living plants and living hosts. And it's really cool to think about it, how, fungi they're living in their food. And it's cool to imagine, if we were like fungi, we would have our stomachs would be like secreting hydrochloric acid into the world and like digesting all this stuff, and then we would reabsorb it back through our skin. That's kind of what they're doing. They're ejecting these extracellular enzymes and acids into their world around them, and then liquefying it and breaking it down into the elemental components that they need, and then reabsorbing it back through their mycelium. And it is rad. They are so metal. Here's a really cool illustration from my friend Willoughby. He has this incredible book on cultivation of fungi, and this is a diagram from his book that talks about the three different modes of nutrition and some of the different examples of fungi that eat in those ways. So Morel's kind of edge on being mycorrhizal fungi and saprotrophic fungi. And then we have the super saprotrophic fungi like shaggy manes, which are dear, dear friends of mine, and I make art with them. And then reishi are also decomposers. So they are breaking down wood and lignin and organic material. Then you have honey mushrooms, which are parasitic. They are actually taking the life force out of the tree and can cause some pretty severe vegetation loss in some forest ecosystems. And then you have mycorrhizal fungi like matsutakes and amanitas are mycorrhizal as well. So they have their plant host that they're associated with. And this is a really beautiful diagram showing just a little bit more of a visual aid and showing how these hyphal tips, these filaments that are going under the ground, are secreting organic acids and enzymes and breaking down cellulose and lignin and even rock. So there's organic acids that fungi produce that literally mine rock for these essential minerals that they need, and then they can uptake those minerals. So they're just doing the work and breaking down and all the time, everywhere. So essential. Here is a great illustration on how fungi are such incredible participants really in the carbon cycles. And I won't get too deep into this because this can be a whole presentation on itself. But fungi are breathing out CO2, but then the mycorrhizal fungi are also sequestering carbon from the atmosphere and holding it in the soil. And they're helping plants hold carbon in their roots. And there's all these different ways that fungi are really doing the work in helping cycle carbon through our atmosphere and through our world, as well as nitrogen. Fungi are taking plants and decomposing them and making these more complex molecules available to microbes and bacteria in the soil, nitrifying bacteria that can then transform ammonium into nitrites, into nitrates, and back into the systems and make them available to plants. So they're a really key component in a lot of these nutrient cycles that I'm assuming there's probably a handful of gardeners here. So if you know and love your plants, then you got to love the fungi, because they're making the plants able to do what they do. And one of the most exciting things to me in the realm of fungi, in the realm of seeing our world too, is just the entire concept and really deep understanding and participation in symbiosis, meaning, just the interaction of organisms and the relationships of beings on this planet. Symbiosis, is the way that life got to where it is, not really against, but challenging some of the Darwinian notions of, natural selection and competition and survival of the fittest. I personally hold the belief that life is a product of collaboration and participation and symbiosis, and life itself is really just the emergent properties of all these different forces coming together. And fungi really emulate that in a powerful way, and exemplify that. So fungi are in symbiosis with just about everything on the planet. Like I said earlier, there's fungi living on your body, there's fungi living on your walls, there's spores flying through the air, there's fungi living on plants and animals and in the soil. So, symbiosis being just the interaction of two things, fungi are in symbiosis with pretty much everything in life. Even underwater, there's this new science coming out about how fungi are actually one of the main decomposers of detritus and of organic material on the benthic floor of the ocean. So fungi are like a huge key component in the food cycles and in the food web of our marine ecosystems, which is just incredible. It's like, okay, yeah, they're everywhere. And fungal algal symbiosis is one of the reasons why life is how we see it today. For about 450 million years ago, there was this really like ancient agreement that went on where there were cyanobacteria and algae living in the prehistoric ocean. And then they wanted to come onto land to get more sunlight to photosynthesize more efficiently. And so these algae and the very primitive fungi, kind of in the form of lichens, decided to make an agreement. And the fungi said to the algae, well, we'll bring you onto land if you can photosynthesize and give us some of your sugars from photosynthesis, and we can help you get nutrients and the water you need so that you can come out of the ocean. Because originally the algae were like bathing in this nutrient-rich, water-rich substance of the ocean. So it was this ancient agreement, kind of like the birth of this love story, is like how I like to think of it, of the fungi and the algae coming together and sharing in this beautiful reciprocity, and forming really like the primitive lichens, which then evolved into some of the non-vascular primitive plants, and then eventually into vascular plants, and eventually into trees and conifers and flowers. And so it was really the fungi that brought plants and photosynthesizing bacteria onto land to create life, to create plants. So thanks for that deep reverence. And lichen, those primitive symbiotic mutual agreements, we still see them today everywhere in the form of lichen. Lichen are these incredible organisms, this conglomeration of photosynthesizing algae and fungal hyphae that come together and produce these organisms that range in color and size and shape. And there's so many different expressions of them in the world, and they live all over the world. There's even in Antarctica, they found lichen beings. They are comprised of two kind of different organisms, what we call the mycobiont, which are the fungi, and then the photobiont, which are the algae. And you can see in this little diagram, these algal cells are just like encapsulated by the fungal hyphae. And they're still doing that agreement where the algae is photosynthesizing and creating carbon sugars. And then they're giving some of those sugars to the fungi, and the fungi are holding water and also like mining the nutrients from whatever substrate they're growing on. So that's why you can see these lichen growing on rock, because it's the fungi that are like putting out acids and enzymes into the rock, literally breaking down the rock, absorbing it through their hyphal walls, and giving that nutrients to the algae that are photosynthesizing. And it's this whole just dynamic unfolding that's happening all over the world. And it's just so incredible. And you can see the expression of the fungus in some of these algae. Like when it gets really wet outside, you'll see these ascocarps forming, or what's really like the fruiting body of the fungus coming out of the lichen. And that's just the mushroom of the lichen, which is really incredible. Lichens have so many medicinal properties, and also vary in a lot of different pigments as well. And those pigments are actually used as sunscreen for the algae. So the fungi are producing these UV sensitive pigments that are acting as sunscreen to protect the algae from getting too much sun. It's incredible. Cool. How am I doing, Lee? Is there any like burning questions that want to come through? I feel like I talk so much.
No, I'm like tearing up with all of it. It's like, I almost feel like I just realized aliens are here on Earth, like there's another being that I don't fully understand that is living on me and in me and everywhere around me. The only question that's come in so far is more on the medicinal side. And I know you're getting up to that. So yeah. I will ask it right around when you start hitting that point.
Great. Yeah. Awesome.
But you're doing great.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. Let me know if anything comes through that is really exciting in that way.
I really love the fact that you're talking about them like they're human beings. You're saying you're saying just that you're building a relationship, and it sounds so awesome, because I think people look at these creatures like they are a piece of paper or something, like an object, but it's very much a living system that is even a little bit more complicated than our own existence.
Yeah. Absolutely. And they can really show us a lot about our own nature, and that we ourselves are not things, but processes. We are processes that are just the amalgamation of trillions of cells undergoing their own unfoldings of life. And the fungi can really show us our dynamicism, and also just seeing them, not even for what they do for humans, but just looking at them within themselves is miraculous. And their the legacy of their existence on this planet is just so phenomenal. I am currently reading a book by Merlin Sheldrake called The Entangled Life, which I highly recommend for anyone wanting to nerd out super hardcore about fungi. And he says that, fungi are not things, they are processes. And I love to think about that in that way, about the world, about everything living. They are not things, they're processes. And how do we honor the process of their life? Speaking of processes, this is one of my, one of the elements of mycology, or the branches of the study of fungi that interests me most, and definitely want to, what I see my path in mycology going towards is the study of mycorrhizae and ecosystem function. But mycorrhizae is that mutualistic relationship between the roots of plants and the mycelium and the hyphae of fungi, this ancient mutualism. And today it's estimated that over 90% of plants rely on their fungal partners to survive, both in seed germination and in sapling growth. and throughout their entire life. These mycorrhizal fungi increase the surface area and the reach of plant roots anywhere from like 10 to 1,000 times. So where roots end, it's really the mycorrhizal fungal mycelial networks that are extending the reach of these plants, so far past what the plants can do themselves. And they're extending them, into one another. So here, I'll skip to this one. So this is a great visual. It's really nice to have visuals. And for those people who are maybe listening without the visuals, I really try my best to explain this in like an understandable way. But so you have two trees in a forest ecosystem, and they don't even have to be the same species of tree, but there are fungal partners that associate with a specific type of tree or plant. And it's the mycelium of that fungus that will partner with the roots and do that mineral and nutrient exchange and chemical exchange. So there's so many different things that are happening here. If one plant is being attacked by a specific parasite, that tree can actually send out chemical signals through the fungal networks and tell trees around it, like, I'm being attacked, time to like put up your defense chemicals so that you don't get attacked as well. So there's this communication happening and this like whole forest ecosystem kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Altruism that's happening when they're really like the trees are looking out for themselves, looking out for them, for their kin. There's a woman named Suzanne Simard, who's a professor of forestry at the University of British Columbia, who's kind of been the spearhead of a lot of this scientific research in mycorrhizal studies. And she's currently doing what's called a mother tree project, because she's one of the first people, her and her colleagues and students have found out that the old growth, really long lasting legacy trees in a forest ecosystem are these nodes that have the most connections to other trees in a forest. So they call them mother trees. And these mother trees have been found to, when they drop seedlings, to specifically send nutrients and carbon sugars and different ways to their seedlings. So they have this ability to recognize who their kin, like who their children are in a forest ecosystem, and send nutrients and different reserves to their kin, to their children, to help them survive. And there's this science is so deep, and I can nerd out about this so for hours and hours and hours, but that's a general overview of some of the mycorrhizal dynamics. There's many different types of mycorrhizal fungi. So there's ectomycorrhizae, arbuscular mycorrhizae, orchid mycorrhizae that specifically pair with orchids. There's ericoid mycorrhizae that pair with the heath plants, so like blueberries and cranberries and vaccinium. There's arbutoid mycorrhizae, but mostly I like to study the ectomycorrhizae and the arbuscular mycorrhizae. Ectomycorrhizae are the fungal hyphae are surrounding the cells in what creates a Hartig sheath. And then the arbuscular mycorrhizae are actually penetrating the cells and forming what's called these arbuscules, which look like little trees within the cells themselves. So like, talk about intimacy. These plants are giving consent. That's another thing. It's not just like this penetrative thing. There's consent happening through chemical signaling where the plants are giving consent for these specific fungi to come in and penetrate their cell walls to exchange nutrients. And it's just this incredible relational dynamic that I think we have a lot to learn from. And there's so much to say here. Oh, mycorrhizae. And ultimately, to me, they're and many other people see it in this way, but through their branching, through their ability to connect, through their signaling, which it's found that there's actually a lot of electrical signaling happening. And that's one of the ways that they communicate, that trees can communicate through each other and that fungi can communicate with the trees, is through electrical signaling. So networking and electrical impulses and intelligence and communication and memory forming and, kind of sounds like our brain, right? So I think of this network as the neural network of our planet is really like the brain of our planet that is holding such profound and deep intelligence. Fungi can make rain, which is really amazing. So life creates the conditions conducive to life. Fungal spores, as they're dropping their spores, they fly up in the air and they actually act as what we call hydroscopic or water seeking or a condensation nuclei, which literally means that they contain different electrical components that attract water to them. So the fungal spores are attracting water droplets in the air, condensing them, forming larger water droplets that eventually condense and form clouds and make rain. So there's this entire system, and trees are doing that as well through their volatile compounds that they're sending out into the air. So there's this entire system that forests and their organisms are actually creating rain, which is forming these large systems of what's called the biotic pump that's bringing moisture in from the coast and dropping it down and creating these like miniature hydrologic cycles above a forest that is there for like taking care of the forest. So life creating the conditions conducive to life. And this is a cool fact. Fungi, like I guess worldwide, produce around 50 megatons of spores each year, which is equivalent to the weight of 100,000 blue whales. So like these tiny little, that goes to show like how many fungal spores are flying around everywhere all the time. So like we are all in it. Foraging. This is something that I love to do so much. It's really the way to get to know your beings. And I'm so grateful to live in a place, to live on southern Pomo and Costa Miwok occupied territory, which is currently called today Sebastopol, California, but just this entire area of the world and all of the Pacific Northwest that has really been intentionally tended by the indigenous peoples for thousands and thousands of years. And to be able to be in relationship with the product of their tending and with this land has just been such an incredible joy and a privilege, such an immense privilege to be able to receive gifts from. And yeah, the coast out here is one of the most fungally, the Redwood Coast is one of the most fungally diverse places in the world. And it's really, really amazing. I feel so blessed to be here. And yeah, when we're out foraging, we're picking for the fruiting body, as our ancestors did for a long, long time all over the world. We've been foraging for mushrooms and being in relationship with these beings. And when you're foraging for a mushroom, it's kind of like picking an apple off of an apple tree. That's the metaphor we like to use. You're just seeing the fruiting body, the reproductive structure of this whole interwoven network of fungal mycelium. So that being said, there's still ways to really consciously forage and ethically forage, just like with all plants and all beings. Don't go into it with an extractive mindset of like, how many am I going to get today? Really, really listen to the land and listen to the fungi. And sometimes if you sit with them and you ask for consent, sometimes they say no. But it takes a really trained ear to really hear when a mushroom says no, when you want to pick it. And there's different ways of looking at that. Some of these more medicinal mushrooms are perennial polypores that can live anywhere from like 10 to 20 to 30 years. So if you're going and you're finding this, 20-year-old mushroom and you want to go harvest it, is it really yours to harvest? And that's kind of the question that I like to hold is like, what is mine to take? How do I stay in right relationship with these beings? How am I not taking more than I need? There's this whole kind of list that I've created, with with influence from Robin Wall Kimmerer's Honorable Harvest from the book Braiding Sweetgrass. She's really helped me see how I can apply that to foraging for fungi and being in relationship with that. Because, we're not the only beings that like to eat them. There's beings out there that rely on fungi and the environment to have, and you cut or pick, doesn't matter. There's been a lot of studies that some people are like, you got to cut them. And some people are like, you got to pick them. And ultimately it doesn't matter. But some people might tell you otherwise. And yeah, there's a lot that I could say here about that. Here's some beautiful photos of some of my foraging adventures. To the bottom left, that's morel hunting in the Sierras. And then above that is Amethysta occidentalis, Lacaria Amethysta occidentalis, which is this beautiful purple mushroom that grows in our area. That's actually then a bolete in the Rocky Mountains. There's so much. It's lovely. And here's more fungal diversity. This is actually from a foray that I went to with the local mycological society. And, to be completely honest, this sometimes kind of bothers me to just take everything you see out of the forest and just lay it on a table. It is great for educational reasons and for identification reasons. But if you're going out and foraging, I definitely don't recommend you to just like pick and pull everything that you see. Because usually what happens after this is just like thrown in a little pile. And it just doesn't feel, to me personally, and this is my own opinion, it doesn't feel honorable to these fungi to just take them all and then throw them away. A little bit about cultivation. I'm also a cultivator. I grow my own mushrooms in many different ways. There's totally high-tech lab techniques, which are beautiful within themselves, but they can be kind of inaccessible and very costly, and you have to use a lot of sterility in those. I have a lot of experience with lab technique, but I prefer low cost, low tech, low waste, using what's emulating how fungi grow in nature and just facilitating that process. So we can divert agricultural waste streams to grow fungi. You can grow fungi on coffee grounds, corn waste, on compost, on cardboard, on old furniture, on books. There's a lot of different mushrooms that can grow on a vast amount of substrates. And then you have log inoculation, where you're drilling holes in wood and then putting the mycelium through dowels or whatever method into the wood. So that's a little bit longer term way of cultivating. And then for garden folk out there, one of my favorite garden mushroom allies the Latin name is Stropharia rugoso annulata, also called garden giant or king Stropharia or wine cap. They are incredible beings that produce these long, stringy hyphal threads called rhizomorphs. And they go in and they are really doing the work to break down organic matter and create habitat for soil microbes and get cycling nutrients and making it accessible to plants. So they're called garden giants because they're great garden companion mushrooms, and they're really easy to grow. I've literally just had wood chips, piles of wood chips, and taken mycelium and thrown it on the wood chips and mixed it up, keeping it in cool, dark areas. And these fungi will grow, and they're huge and beautiful burgundy red, and they're edible and delicious. They kind of taste like portobello. So here are some pictures. These are all my own pictures of just some examples of like low cost, low tech, really accessible ways that you can grow and cultivate fungi. And, that's an entire conversation of its own. But if you're interested in any of these, reach out to me, and I would love to sit with you and teach you how to grow your own mushrooms, whether you're in Florida or whether you're in California or whether you're in Europe. We all have the ability to have autonomy in our food and medicine and grow our own fungi. They're out there and they want to be incorporated.
I do have a question about whether or not mushrooms are sentient beings.
Ooh, that is a great question.
A vegetarian wants to know, and someone else wants to know a little bit more information about mycorrhizae in relation to vegetable gardening.
Okay, cool. I also want to do a time check, Lee. When's my end time for this presentation?
Whenever you want. You tell me.
That feels so good because, okay, great. Because timing definitely is a thing, and I can talk for a long time. So thank you for that spaciousness. And okay, so to address those questions, the first question, are mushrooms, are fungi sentient beings? I think that really, and this is something I think about and have held as a question for a really long time. And, I extend that question to all of life. What is sentient? And I think it comes down to asking that question. What does sentient mean to you? What does sentient mean to us? How do we define intelligence? How do we define what is alive and what's not? So for me, to be a sentient being is holding intelligence, holding the means to respond to environmental stimuli, holding the means to communicate and collaborate and be in relationship and feel. And I personally think mushrooms are absolutely sentient beings, but definitely hold a different expression of that of being sentient than humans or animals would. And it really helps me to extend my own definitions and capacity of what being an intelligent or an emotional being is, and extending it to the fungi, because I've sat with fungi a lot, and to me, they are absolutely emotional beings. But they're not gonna tell you that through voice or through language. But they might tell you that in other ways, and they're responding to their environment. There's incredibly adaptive creatures that are responding and understanding and seeing their world not through eyes, but through different sensory organs, and communicating not through voice, but through electricity and chemicals. So that is a great question. And I really, I'm not the one who's going to answer that. I think the only way we can answer whether or not we think something is sentient and intelligent and alive is by answering that within ourselves. So I really invite you, the next time you see a mushroom, sit with it and ask it whether it's sentient or not. And so that's what I'm going to say about that. And then the other question about mycorrhizal fungi in relationship with vegetables. So that's a great question as well. Most of our crops, most of our vegetables and food that we eat are also rely on their mycorrhizal partners to survive. Mostly the genus Glomeromycota is a really huge genus of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi that are, doing that work of bringing nutrients and water to plants. And they are, in relationship with most of the vegetables and food that we eat. And besides, there's certain plants like the brassicas that are actually non-mycorrhizal species. So brassicas and corn and, a couple other families of plants are actually non-mycorrhizal. Those make up for the small percentage of plants that are non-mycorrhizal. And there's hypotheses out there that corn actually used to be a mycorrhizal species, but through our intensive agriculture and monoculture and like pumping in fertilizers and pesticides and different things, we've actually made corn evolve to be non-mycorrhizal. Because in the garden and in agriculture, when you're putting in so many nutrient inputs and fertilizing, it's actually promoting the disconnection of mycorrhizal and plant symbioses, because the plants have all these nutrients already provided to them. So why would they need their fungal partner to do the work to provide their nutrients for them? So it's actually it's very disadvantageous to the fungal plant symbiosis when you put fertilizer into a system. It discourages even the formation of that relationship. It can discourage, which, if the plants are getting all their nutrients, great, but there's so many emergent properties that come from that mycorrhizal symbiosis that the plant then is not receiving because the relationship hasn't formed. And ultimately, you're going to have a much less healthier plant, a much less healthier ecosystem. That's why I'm, such an advocate for no-till and like letting those networks and communities and organisms flourish in the soil. Because, extensive and abrasive tilling can also kill the mycorrhizal symbiosis of plants and fungi. So there's a lot to say there. I'm all for regenerative agriculture in the means of bringing mycorrhizal fungi back into systems and really just letting these intelligent beings do what they've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. So that's what I have to say about that, but much more I could say. So we're going to take a little detour into mushroom medicine. And, medicine, I think, can mean a lot of things. I think everything I've been talking about is also medicine, like ecological medicine. These quote unquote non-medicinal fungi are still performing acts of healing in the environment all the time, that are allowing medicinal plants to grow, that are allowing our immune systems to flourish. Even the molds and yeasts and bacteria and all these things on our skin are medicine that are keeping our immunological functions going and keeping them regenerative. But focusing a little bit more on the medicinal mushrooms is a really fun deep dive. And medicinal fungi have been used extensively throughout human history all over the world. This is the field of mushroom medicine is nothing new. Our ancestors have been using this for a long, long, long time, dating all the way back to 9000 BC in certain tribal bands in North Africa. There's beautiful, pretty elaborate cave paintings and cave carvings on the inside of some caves in Northern Africa of depictions of mushrooms. They're extensively used in China and in Chinese medicine for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Reishi, given the name Lingji in Chinese medicine, which is the mushroom of immortality. And, they hold the reishi in such significance and really revere the mushrooms. Also in Europe. So in my ancestry in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia and in Norway and in Germany, there's a huge, elaborate kind of cultural relationship with mushrooms in Europe as well. And it's both, I feel both grief and praise in that, because in the Western world, our relationship with fungi has definitely been fissured in a lot of ways. And through that process of what I was talking about earlier, through the mycophobia and kind of being taught that, these beings are weird and dark and scary and dangerous, so we should stay away from them. And it's actually done a huge disservice, I think, to modernity, to be in fear of these beings and not to be in relationship with them like our ancestors were. Also want to make a shout out here to Maria Sabina, who is a Mazatec curandera in Mexico. And she was one of the people who held this, the medicine of sacred mushrooms and psychoactive mushrooms. She was really a deep medicine woman and holder of these psychoactive mushrooms that were eventually, exploited and taken to the Western world, and then kind of blew up in this whole way. And unfortunately, her culture and her people were pretty devastated and impacted by the way that psychoactive mushrooms were brought into the Western world from her sacred practices, which she used only ceremoniously and only in ceremony. And then they were taken, and a lot of the partiers and rock stars got on the kick, and we held the question, just like everyone is like, what is God and how do we find God? And long story short, a lot of Westerners started going down to Mexico seeking out these sacred mushrooms, and it really impacted her people and her village. And she was really harmed by that process. So shout out to her. Definitely recommend, if you've ever used or want to use psychedelic fungi, I really invite you to read her story, read the story of Maria Sabina, and really sit with that knowledge, because it's deep, and it can really help inform our relationship with using psychedelic fungi. So other mushroom medicine that are not so psychotropically mind altering, fungi contain whole suites of different enzymes and compounds and polysaccharides and terpenes and aldehydes and keystones and phenolic compounds and volatile compounds and fatty acids. Like, the list goes on and on and on. And it can get really heady science and molecular. But just know that these fungal beings, they contain a large diversity of compounds, which makes them so efficient in providing immunological responses. And because animals and fungi have those, certain types of similarities and characteristics, the compounds that fungi are producing are actually very well received in our body. So our immune cells, our innate immune cells, our macrophages, have specific receptor sites for fungal compounds. So specifically these polysaccharides, which are it's a fancy word for long chain sugars. They're called fungal beta glucans. And here's a little diagram that can really, really help. So in the cell wall of fungi, there's chitin, which is that like hard structural compound. And then they're linked with these beta glucans, these sugars in the cell wall of fungi. And it's these beta glucans which are providing a lot of the immunological functions. I'm going to go back. Okay. Yeah, it's these beta glucans that are performing a lot of the immunomodulating functions in the body. So these beta glucans get extracted, and then they go throughout the body, and then they actually bind to specific beta glucan receptor sites on the cells of our immune response, which is incredible, that coevolution, that symbiosis on an internal level of fungi and humans. And that's one of the reasons why mushroom medicine is so efficient, and why it has such a high safety profile, because our bodies are recognizing these compounds and really integrating them in a beautiful way. Other than that, there's ergothioneine is an essential amino acid that's found in all mushrooms. And it's one of the amino acids that we need to get through our diet. And it's also an incredible medicine for liver damage and neurodegenerative diseases, heart disease, skin cell regeneration. So whether you're drinking mushroom tea, a reishi mushroom tea, or you're eating oyster mushrooms, you're getting that ergothioneine. And they have all these different compounds in different concentrations as well. And another thing, the beta glucans I was talking about, the fungal sugars are also found in every mushroom because they're part of the cell wall. So whether you're drinking a medicinal mushroom tea or eating shiitakes, you're also getting those fungal beta glucans, which are really powerful for health and immune response. Here's some beautiful pictures of some of my favorite fungal allies. On the left is a huge Ganoderma applanatum, which is our local reishi. It's in the Ganoderma genus, which reishi, the common like red reishi or lingji, is Ganoderma lucidum. And here we don't have Ganoderma lucidum because it's not warm enough, really. And so we have Ganoderma applanatum, which is a reishi cousin. And this is a huge one, speaking to that, perennial nature of these polypores that can live to be, 10, 20 years old. This one I did not harvest. It was harvested from someone who I know. And they said, it was dead and decaying. But if I were to find a being this big on a tree out in nature, I don't think I would feel not worthy enough, but it would just feel strange to harvest what feels like an elder, but it's beautiful to be in the presence of that. And that mushroom is actually on an altar right next to me. So, hey, good to see you. And here's some other medicinal mushrooms that I work with really frequently, including the red-belted conch, the artist conch, turkey tail, the rosy polypore. There's just so much medicine out there for us. Like I said, the beta glucans are in all fungi, and they're really what's performing one of the more potent medicinal responses of fungi is what we call immunomodulation. And immunomodulation is this incredible process where it's not increasing immune function or decreasing it, it's actually modulating it. So mushrooms are biological response modifiers. So they're actually tending to your specific body's needs, and they're not like just spiking the immune system or totally depressing it. And a lot of immune medicines are actually just immune stimulants. So they're stimulating the immune system, but that's not always necessarily good because, for example, like autoimmune diseases are actually a body's reaction to too much of an immune response happening in a certain area of the body. So arthritis or inflammation, inflammation is just a product of the innate immune response. But when there's too much of that happening, it can cause a lot of really serious problems. And so fungi are not just stimulating the immune system. They're actually going in and maybe, if you already have too much inflammation happening in a certain area of the body, they'll go in and actually decrease the immune response in that certain area of the body. So they're so amazing. And there's incredible science behind this and so much research out there. One of my teachers and friends, her name is Anna Sitkoff, sorry. And she is a medicinal mushroom researcher up at Bastyr University in Washington, and an amazing mushroom medicine maker. And her website, Reishi and Roses, is a just wellspring of knowledge and research coming from both the fungal lens and how these compounds are working in the fungus, kind of like, de-anthropocentrizing it, because a lot of people see it's like, oh, mushrooms are medicine, so how can I use that? But we hardly ever think about how are these compounds that mushrooms are producing, how are they working for the fungus itself? And then how do they work for me? So it's really beautiful. She frames it in these two ways. So definitely recommend Reishi and Roses. Type it in on Google. And she goes through all her different medicinal mushroom preparations and shares her research and really breaks it down on a relatively digestible and accessible level, like the hard science behind mushroom medicine. So she's amazing and makes all of this knowledge open source. She's one of my main teachers, and I make a lot of mushroom medicine myself. And have actually just started on a journey of sharing my mushroom medicine with the world, which is really exciting. After many years of kind of experimenting with my own ways of approaching it, I've started selling tinctures through my Etsy page and through community. And it's just such an incredible process, and really making all of this knowledge open source is what I think is really going to help us on a collective level take autonomy over our healing and not be so reliant on outside forces and on pharmaceuticals to heal ourselves, but really look back to nature, and use all of the allies that exist in nature to help us be autonomous and sovereign in our healing journeys, because we're all on one. And these are some infographics that's on her website, talking about fungal polysaccharides and also how to make mushroom tea. The great part of these beta-glucan polysaccharides, these immunomodulating compounds, is that they're water soluble. So really, to get a lot of the polysaccharides, all you need to do is just make a tea with your fungi. And teas are really good for like the harder, woody, like non-edible medicinal mushrooms like turkey tail and reishi, and rosy polypore, and a couple other ones. That's the ones I at least work with up here. There might be different ones in Florida or wherever you're watching. But tea is really good for those, and boil no less than 2 hours, because that helps break the heat, and water is what breaks the cell walls and allows these polysaccharides to come out and be extracted. But I always advise, if you can eat the mushroom, like these softer bodied mushrooms like shiitake and oyster and lion's mane and chanterelles and whatever it might be, if you can eat them, I always recommend eating them, because that's how, this medicine has been used for thousands and thousands of years, just by consuming them. Now we have the technology and the science to go in and extract and synthesize and like do all these things, but medicine is brought in the packages it's brought in for a reason. I personally believe. So these mushrooms contain whole consortia of medicine, and the best way to get that in your body is really through eating it, if they can be eaten. And with that being said, always cook your mushrooms. Always cook your mushrooms. It's the heat itself that is going to break down the cell walls of the fungus and allow the beta-glucans to be expressed so that the body can synthesize them. And also there's a lot of different things where if you don't cook mushrooms, different toxins can be present. But for the most part, just general baseline rule, always cook your mushrooms. Cool. Here's a couple really beautiful pictures of some fungi that I work really extensively with. The top right is a red-belted conch, Phomotopsis panicola, exuding, kind of dripping this like what's called guttation, or this like enzymatic sweat that they like sweat out extra water, but it's that sweat that's like full of enzymes and compounds and just like yumminess. And so if it's wet outside and if I ever see mushrooms doing this, I'll often like go and lick them, because these water droplets are full of medicine. And underneath that is Ganoderma applanatum, or artist conch. It's a local temperate reishi. And then this is a really beautiful turkey tail mandala that I made from one of my harvests. Turkey tails are super ubiquitous and abundant, and I definitely know that they grow all over Florida too. Amazing medicine, full of immunomodulating polysaccharides, and really great for gut health, really extensively researched for treating breast cancer and for anti-cancer compounds. I could speak a lot to them, but I really invite you to go on your own medicinal mushroom research journey. There's a lot out there. Or if you have specific questions, please ask me. I will sit with you and talk about mushrooms for a long time. Here are some of my tinctures, just highlighting some of the different ones that I work with. And you can find those too online. Okay, so I'm getting more towards the end. I'm gonna dive into a little bit about mycoremediation. And thank you all for listening to all this juiciness.
This is incredible. I'm like, I did not even realize, and I have a feeling this next section is going to be even deeper. But really quick, I think two or three of the questions are kind of around identification.
Okay,
and I
please,
know that
yeah.
I know that's a whole thing. So maybe you can give some books or maybe some shout outs, because I think people are a little afraid of like poisonous or toxic mushrooms.
Absolutely. And I didn't go too deep into specific identification on here, because I know that most of these viewers are probably in Florida, I'm assuming, and I'm out in California, and there's completely different diverse realms of fungi that grow in our unique bioregions. But just a breakdown of kind of how to stay safe when foraging for mushrooms for food or medicine is always, if you have the opportunity, go with someone who knows. Go with someone you really trust, who like knows these mushrooms, and have your first couple experiences of foraging be with someone who really knows their stuff. I'm going to make a shout out to John, Fungi John, who's an incredible wealth of Florida and Southeast mushroom knowledge and identification. He does mushroom walks and leads classes. So shout out to you, John. Such an incredible human. Recommend going with him. Try to see if there's a local mycological club that you can join. There's whole bunches of Facebook groups that are localized to specific bioregions as well. So try to join a Facebook group. There's apps. There's iNaturalist and other identification apps that you can use for getting more specifics. You can go out and take a picture, and there's phone algorithms that will like point you almost directly to whatever mushroom you're working with or what you're looking at, so that you don't have to flip through all these dichotomous keys and these field guides. But that being said too, my personal favorite way is to have a field guide and to really sit with the process of identification. There's many different layers to identification based on physical characteristics, based on olfactory characteristics, so how they smell. There's taste tests you can do. That being said, don't put any random mushroom in your mouth. That's a no-no. But mostly, I like to start with, there's a lot of really amazing mushrooms out there, and there's relatively few, like in the grand scheme of things, there are relatively few mushrooms that are going to kill you. There's different realms of toxins that are really dangerous, including the amatoxins are some of the most dangerous. Those are the toxins that will really do damage and cause liver damage and liver failure and will kill you. But those amatoxins are not found in very many mushrooms. They're found in the genus Amanita, and a little bit in Galerina. And other than that, there's poisons and like toxins in mushrooms that will make you sick, but not so much kill you. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is, one of the best approaches, if you're really scared that you're going to find a mushroom that's going to kill you, and that you're scared that you're going to make a mistake, get to know the dangerous and deadly mushrooms really, really well. Study them, see what they look like in your area, get to know the deadly mushrooms in your area that are present. And once you get to know those, you can have the eye. So when you're out in the field, and if you see anything that looks like them, then you know to take extra precaution when picking or for food or medicine. Medicinal polypores are really great, as in there's super high safety profile. So there's very, very, very few medicinal polypores, which are mushrooms that have pores on the bottom that kind of grow as shelves. There are very few medicinal polypores that will do any harm. So they have a really high safety profile. But when it comes to more fleshy edible mushrooms, there are dangerous lookalikes. There are some really sought after edibles that do have some poisonous lookalikes. And so it's a dynamic process, and it takes time. It really takes time. So definitely don't give in to cockiness or ego and go out and collect a whole basket of mushrooms and like make a meal for your friends if you don't know exactly what you have. Field guides in California, there's a lot. There's Edible Mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest. There's my personal favorite book. I don't have it with me. I should have brought all my books in here, but is Mushrooms of the Redwood Coast. That's the field guide that I mostly use on the coastal area of where I live. But I know that there's field guides. There's Mushrooms of the Southeast, and just definitely recommend. And then there's more holistic field guides, like Mushrooms Demystified, and many different sources for that. But I definitely recommend buying a bioregional specific field guide, and then using that, going out in the field, taking specimens, really sitting and getting to know the different types of mushrooms. So, but I absolutely hear you. When I first started foraging, there was, a lot of kind of anxiety and fear that I held around too, of like, oh no, what if I mess up? What if I eat the wrong thing? And I've personally been poisoned a couple times, which is a really unpleasant experience. And that being said, I was poisoned by an edible mushroom that is really safe for some people, but I had a allergic reaction to, because and that's a great point too, like some edible mushrooms that are prized edible mushrooms that are really safe for some people, you can also have an allergic reaction to them. So like the shaggy parasol, for me, chlorophyllum is a delicacy, a delicious mushroom for some people, but my own specific body constitution had an allergic reaction to it, and I was sick for a really long time. So just be safe, be vigilant, be safe, be curious, be cautious, and be patient with the process. Really, like, patience is the one big thing. Took me years to hold the knowledge that, I do. And even my identification skills are nowhere near compared to some of the elders in the field that have been working with these beings for 30, 40 years. So bioregional, safety. And if you ever want additional eyes, take pictures of your mushrooms and then send them to me, because I like helping identify. It helps me get to learn as well. Does that answer the question? Okay, great. Tangents galore. So the next realm I'm going to get into is most of the work that I do. It's the applied part of my applied mycology. I guess it can all be applied, like making the medicine and going out in the field, but this is really for me what I hold as the most enriching part of the work that I do and the study of fungi that I am exploring and part of. And it's in remediation. So mycoremediation literally breaks down into the Greek word myco, meaning fungus, and remedium, which is Latin for restoring balance. So using fungi to restore balance to ecosystems, which, as we all have a lot of awareness around. And I'm assuming that we do have awareness around this here in this audience, is that we've set a lot of these systems and cycles pretty far out of balance. We've put a lot of human inputs into these systems that have encouraged them to pass tipping points and to kind of go over the edge. And so how do we ally with these incredible earth alchemists and these recomposers and these beings that have been around for billions of years, that have been keeping these cycles perpetuating and keeping these cycles in balance? How do we just come in and learn from them and ally with them to figure out how to bring holistic and natural restoration into some of these systems that we've augmented? And through all of this, fungi have the natural ability to break down pollutants. So one of our biggest issues that we're dealing with on the planet is all of our messes. We have taken natural compounds and synthesized them and put them together and made polymer chains that required a lot of energy to create, and they are very persistent. These organic pollutants, these plastics, these chemicals, we've augmented these natural substances into these hard polymer chains that are very biopersistent and that are going to be around for a lot longer than we are. So what do we do? That's something that has weighed on me so heavy my whole entire life, is like, how do we even begin to address, our waste footprint on this planet, the gyre of plastic that's the size of Texas in the middle of the ocean? Like, what do we do? And it's brought me so much expansiveness and spacious and hope and liberation to understand the inner workings of these fungi and how they actually have the natural chemical abilities to break down these pollutants on a molecular level. So there's a lot of different realms in myco and bioremediation. I'm going to specifically be talking about mycoremediation, which is the use of fungi, but I do want to shout out to the microbial remediation using bacteria to break down pollutants, as well as phytoremediation, which is the use of plants to sequester pollutants and volatilize them and transform them, and sequester heavy metals and bind them in their leaves and bark. There's a lot of different approaches to this, which is a talk I actually gave last night about bioremediation. So very keen on this subject. So in most mycoremediation installations, we're mainly using saprotrophic fungi for this. And why? One, because we have relative ease and knowledge of cultivating a saprotrophic species. And if you can remember, saprotrophic meaning feeding on dead or dying or decaying materials. In cultivation, that's mostly what we cultivate is these saprotrophic fungi like oysters and shiitakes and lion's mane, and maitake, and a lot of other different cremini mushrooms, all the different ones that grow off of this organic material. So we know how to cultivate them. Mycorrhizal fungi are really difficult to cultivate and or not able to be cultivated in the sense that we need to cultivate them. So saprotrophic fungi can be cultivated to scale. And because of their ability to break down organic matter, they produce these cellulose and lignin degrading enzymes. So about 1 billion years ago, fungi created the ability to produce these enzymes that break down these really complex structural molecules like cellulose and lignin of what plants are made from, the structural compounds in plants. So about 1 billion years ago, fungi said, you know what, we need more food. We're going to figure out how to eat plants really efficiently. And so they created these suites of enzymes that break down lignin and cellulose. And lignin and cellulose are really complex ringed structural molecules. So to the left-hand side, this is actually the molecular structure of lignin, or a small part of it. So you can see these aromatic rings, these hydrocarbon rings that provide the structure of these molecules. So because saprotrophic fungi can go in and break down lignin, they can also break down what we call polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PCBs, all these organic pollutants, which are very structurally similar to lignin, because petroleum and crude oil and all these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and their derivatives are literally just old, non-degraded organic material that has been buried under the earth for a really long time. So before fungi figured out how to break down plants, they just decomposed and got squashed and buried and buried under pressure under the earth, which is the gas and oil that we use, the fossil fuels that we use nowadays, because they're so volatile and so high in energy from these hydrocarbon bonds. So all these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons are just old ancient plants that have been transformed, and fungi have the ability to break down plants. So fungi therefore have the ability to break down these organic pollutants. And when I found that out, it like transformed my life. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And they do this through some really incredible chemical and metabolic pathways. This is just a diagram of a pretty, the science here gets really heavy really fast, so I'm going to keep it light. This is showing how cellular, the process on a cellular level, how fungi can produce these ligninases and cellulases that are breaking down the lignin and cellulose and pretty much breaking it down and cleaving all these hydrocarbon bonds so that they can get sugar, like glucose, out of the plants that they're consuming. And because they can do that, this is just a visual pathway of phenanthrene, which is a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon and organic pollutant, that Pleurotus ostreatus, which is our common oyster mushroom, it's literally breaking this organic pollutant down via its enzymes. They also, fungi have the ability to sequester heavy metals out of the environment. So with organic pollutants, because of the enzymes that fungi have, organic pollutants can actually be degraded and broken down into their components that can be recycled back into nutrient cycles. So they are able to be totally broken down. Heavy metals, on the other hand, are already in their elemental form, so you can't break down heavy metals. And when heavy metals are in certain concentrations, it really inhibits a lot of cellular responses in organic beings like us. So it's really, really bad. Heavy metals are bioaccumulative and biopersistent because they can't be broken down. So they enter into food chains and food webs and cycles and ecosystems, and they just accumulate and accumulate and accumulate and become really toxic, like some of the things that we're seeing in our marine animals right now, in our fish and in our marine mammals, the bioaccumulation of these heavy metals. So what fungi do through another set of really miraculous pathways is they can actually, through the mycelial surface, through the hyphal surface, there's this ion exchange mechanism that happens where they can bring in these metals that have certain charges on them and either absorb them through their hyphal walls, or they can undergo a process called chelation, where they can actually chelate heavy metals and make them no longer reactive and toxic in the environment. But mostly fungi are known for sequestering the heavy metals, bringing them into their hyphal cell walls and into their bodies, and then concentrating them in their mushroom fruiting bodies. So that is a really amazing, amazing way we can ally with these beings. There's mycofiltration, which is a similar concept, except instead of healing soil and decontaminating soil, we're flowing water through these mycelial, what's kind of like a mycelial membrane, a biological membrane. And the mycelium can be either alive or it can actually be dead and still sequester heavy metals. So this is a field that I'm working with pretty in depth right now, is in mycofiltration. Here's some beautiful images of mycelium, and you can see that very tight-knit network that they're forming, this membrane, this like active membrane where water can pass through, but other contaminants bind to the mycelial surface. Here are some examples of mycofilters being applied in the environment. There's a lot of different studies out right now on mycofiltration, still lacking a lot of like the hard data that we need to show whether they're actually being effective or not. But the theory behind it is that these mycofilters can be very, very effective in sequestering contaminants and helping filter water and protecting our waterways, and actually helping decrease eutrophication as well by breaking down nitrogen and getting excess nutrients out of water bodies, which I know is a huge ecological problem in Florida right now, is eutrophication of the water bodies and excess nutrients entering water systems. So I work for Bay Area Applied Mycology. I've been their officer for the past couple of years, and we've done some of these mycofiltration installations, specifically using Stropharia rugoso annulata, the garden giant that I was speaking to earlier, growing their mycelium and putting them in burlap bags, super low-tech, low-cost ways of doing this work, really accessible for many people to use. And Stropharia have the ability to break down and eat waterborne pathogens out of the water. So here's some examples of us doing that. We were doing it on a cattle land, so preventing excess nutrients and E. coli and other waterborne pathogens from entering the water body for the stream that was just downhill from this. Here's another example of implementation that we did on a woman's land in Oakland who had a sewage pipe break up above her land, and there was like sewage and like really nasty, harmful chemicals going onto her land. So we created these like mycofiltration buffers on her land. And this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. Thank you so much for staying with me through all this. I currently work for Co-Renewal, which is a mycological organization dedicated to providing community outreach and education, and really working with a lot of myco-restoration initiatives, both here in Northern California and in Ecuador, helping to decontaminate the multiple oil spills that have happened in the Amazonian regions of Ecuador, using fungi to help remediate the oil down there and working with indigenous communities. So recently we had, living in Northern California, as you all, might have heard, we're dealing with this huge element of fire right now, learning how to live with fire. And ultimately, we live in a fire ecology. Out west, the indigenous peoples have been working with fire since time immemorial, enacting cultural burns on the land and keeping fire as a regenerative force on the land. And over the past century, through the attempted eradication of the indigenous people from white colonial settlers, there is a subsequent effect that has happened where, because we've suppressed and oppressed the indigenous people, we've also suppressed their way of being with the land and tending the land, which is cultural burning. And over the past century, there's been this reduction in fire on the land, which has led to a buildup of fuels. And through that, intersecting with climate change and all these other forces that are happening, and the eradication of the beaver and the bear and the change in the hydrological cycles, it's so deep and systemic. We're seeing these catastrophic wildfires that we're seeing now. And so one of the things that we're doing with Co-Renewal is, because of these wild urban interfaces that are happening, as humans continue to encroach into forested ecosystems and live in the wild, these huge catastrophic fires are coming through now and burning houses and structures and causing a lot of devastation. And it's really intense to be with. And I know a lot of people who have lost everything that they have in their life, like everything. And it's a reality that I sit with myself, and I'm so grateful that I haven't had to go through that process myself. But it's a reality that everyone who lives here now sits with all the time. One of those additional layers of climate crisis and how that affects us. So what we're trying to do is prevent the secondary disaster from wildfires. When these structures burn, there's all types of crap that's left behind. Like all the things that we live with in our house, like our paints and our chemicals and our cars and our tars and all the different consortia of chemicals that we live with, burn, and they don't go away. They sit there. And then when the rains come, this toxic ash runoff can go into the environment and really do severe damage to the surrounding ecosystems. So we are taking this microremediation knowledge and applying it by making these wattles to kind of cap structures and cap houses. And we're inoculating wattles with different microbes and fungi and different species depending on the contaminant. And we're working to help keep those toxins concentrated and working to break down the toxins where they are, to help protect the watersheds and the outside environment from these biopersistent pollutants. There's a lot more I could say there, but that's just a little bit of it. I'm also an artist. I make ink from mushrooms. Coprinus comatus is a really sweet mushroom that digests itself into this black spore goo ooze that I harvest and I make ink out of, and make these pretty pictures with them. This is a little bit of my art that I make, and I really try to embody fungal activism through making art with mushrooms and talking about mushrooms, and really trying to get the word out there about how important these beings are. As you know, I care really deeply about them and really feel like they hold so many answers for the unfoldings that are happening on a global scale. You can also do mycopigments. This is just a little touch on some of the other fun things mushrooms can do. You can dye fabrics with mushrooms. All this whole consortia of colors right here are from fungal beings, both mushrooms and lichen. Shout out to Alyssa Allen, who is the founder of Mycopigments. Go on Google and type in mycopigments if this stuff excites you. There's a whole realm of different art realms that you can do with mushrooms. And then this is my last slide, just touching on mycopsychology. And I think a lot of the things that I touched on here, reiterating those, mycelium is better thought of not as a thing, but a process which we can extend to all things of life, not objectifying something as a thing, but thinking of everything as a process, every being as a process, and how to honor that. Seeing fungi as decentralized intelligence. So another quote from Merlin Sheldrake's book, they are everywhere at once and nowhere in particular. And that really sits and resonates with me. This intelligence, this ability to adapt and observe the world everywhere at once and nowhere in particular. They are also the bridgers of life and death, doing the work in the soil and these cryptic organisms down in the soil, and then coming and sprouting into the light and sharing their gifts with us. They are kind of these bridges between life and death. And I think we have a lot to learn from them, how to be in relationship with our own mortality and with our own death, and the cycles of life. As above, so below. They're radically adaptable. They allocate their resources. So in human societies, how can we learn from them how to take things that are too concentrated in one place and move them to another place, which I know, fleet farming is doing such an incredible job with, and food justice and racial justice and social justice. Fungi are really such powerful teachers in how to live in harmony and live in balance with all of life. And I personally think the past is fungi, the present fungi, and the future is definitely fungi. And we got a lot to learn. Thank you so much. I know I just went through so many different realms and talked for quite some time, probably a little bit longer than we thought, but it is such a pleasure.
You did an incredible job. I'm so impressed with all of the knowledge that you've just absorbed in your very young, vivacious life. And yet I feel like you're just beginning your journey. So I'm so honored that you shared everything that you shared today. For those of you who are just tuning in or maybe just caught the end of this, I'm going to try to do a little speed round here. So you're trying to tell me that fungi can basically remediate heavy toxins out of the soil, can help break down rocks and turn them into minerals for themselves and for other plants. They can filter water, they can filter the air, they can help sequester carbon. They're edible, they can help give us nutrients, they can help, oh my goodness, there's so many things. It's just like, at the end of the day, I feel like the fact that we've been so disassociated with nature and the fact that there's so much that we don't know. And I think humans have always just gone for the quick fix, which is why we're so quick to turn towards pills and prescription drugs in order to just get a remedy that, and sometimes can save our lives, but in other times could really stunt us from having access to the beautiful gifts that nature has to offer. You even brought up the psychedelic mushroom piece because I have these conversations with my friends all the time about how there's a stigma, a really nasty stigma against certain medicinal qualities that I think people have just stamped on Mother Earth's gifts, that when it comes to mental health and physical health, when you're suffering from things like depression or things like chemical imbalances in your brain, there are some gifts that could help facilitate your path to finding a balance. But because we stamp it as something taboo, we suppress our ability to fully understand what these gifts could do to help our entire society. Because if more people could utilize these gifts to get better, and we truly defined what well meant in a different context than just being able to wake up and function in our society today, and we saw how nature gives us everything we need to be well, then we'll have this new sense of respect. And one thing you didn't say, which I'm going to call it outright accountability for our actions. Bioremediation with these amazing creatures is great, but we need to be the ones stewarding the relationships to clean up our own mess too. So that's my 2 cents on everything you just taught me today.
Beautiful. And thank you so much for recapping that and for bringing up those 2 important points. Just like destigmatizing the use of psychedelic fungi and alternative forms of medicine, the health issues that we're facing on a biophysical level, on an anatomical level, and a psycho-emotional level are so complex right now, like climate grief and depression and isolation from the virus. Like there's so many different compounding levels right now. And I think that, systemic issues need systemic regenerative solutions. And I really think that fungi, both psychedelic and non, and really even just their presence can help us be with the unknown in a more peaceful way. And also hold us accountable too, of like I think anyone that has used psychedelic fungi might know that it wakes you up in ways that are unprecedented. As we well know, it wakes us up and it connects us and it reveals deeper layers of truth. And these fungi, these fungal beings, really help show us where where we need to put our energy, both in our own interpersonal lives and in the world, and how to show up, how to take accountability and align our awareness with our actions. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing to be aware of these things, and it's another thing to really act on them and create the life that we know can honor the rest of life as well. So.
Well, thank you so much. You got so many thank yous in the chat. And so everybody, everyone. Please reach out to Taylor if you want. I tagged her in this post. If you have any additional questions, please make sure you're with a professional if you ever want to go foraging. That was another big recap that we talked about. And at the end of the day, Taylor, just thank you so much. I appreciate you. And we'll be signing off.
Thank you all so much. Looking forward to chatting in a different time.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Blessings all.